The DD India app, connecting you to the world, one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights, and authentic information.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, Israeli military intensifies its bombing of Gaza, clashes with the Palestinians in the West Bank, also targets Syria and the Hezbollah in Lebanon. UN chief says Hamas's attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Israel protests, denies visa to UN relief chief, refuses to issue visas to UN officials. A top Israeli official says Qatar's intervention in the humanitarian aspects of the war with the Hamas is crucial at this time. India tells the UN Security Council that it stands in solidarity with Israel against terrorism, but warns that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is equally alarming. And India set to overtake Japan as the third largest economy by the year 2030, says an S&P Global Market Intelligence report. First up, the latest on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. A top Israeli official has said that Qatar is becoming essential to finding humanitarian solutions and that its diplomatic efforts are crucial in the Israel-Hamas war. After a meeting with Turkey's foreign minister, Qatar's prime minister said that there's been some progress on negotiations for the release of the more than 200 people held hostage by the Hamas. Turkey's foreign minister said that an Israeli ground operation in Gaza will lead to a massacre. The Gulf state, in coordination with the US, is mediating talks between the Hamas and Israeli officials for the safe release of the hostages.
On the hostages negotiation, it's still ongoing. We have seen some progress in the past few days with the release of the first two Americans and then the release of the two women two days ago with the mediation of Egypt as well. I think that if we compare where we started and where we are right now, there is some progress and some breakthrough, and we will remain hopeful. The negotiations are still ongoing.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, while visiting military units in the Suez, emphasized Egypt's significant efforts in de-escalating the Gaza crisis. In a message, Sisi stressed the importance of diplomatic solutions to addressing the Palestinian cause.
Regarding the developments in the Gaza Strip, allow me to say that we are playing a very positive role in de-escalating the situation and attempting to calm the situation and to stop the conflict, as well as working towards ceasefire to stop the bloodshed currently taking place.
Wednesday is day 19 of the Israel-Hamas war. There have been more than 7,000 casualties on both sides. The United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire as hospitals started shutting down in the Gaza Strip because of a shortage of fuel.
Don't be scared. Your family is safe. Civil defense personnel told the father under rubble in Gaza while being rescued. This is just one. There are thousands of such stories of rescue and survival. These parents tied blue and white bracelets on the wrists of their children. This is their way of recognizing their children if something happens.
I have seen bodies ripped apart. If something happens and they are in pieces, this way I will recognize them from these bracelets. I will collect their parts.
Hundreds of such families have taken shelter in these refugee camps in Khan Yunis. Everyone has a story to tell. The United Nations says there is clear violations of international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip.
The situation in the Middle East is growing more dire by the hour. The war in Gaza is raging and risks spiraling throughout the region. Divisions are splintering societies, tensions threaten to boil over. At a crucial moment like this, it is vital to be clear on principles, starting with the fundamental principle of respecting and protecting civilians.
The International Monetary Fund also raised concern about the loss of lives in the Israel-Gaza war and the destruction of economic activity. Israel has imposed a total siege on Gaza. Countries have engaged in diplomatic talks focused on movement of humanitarian aid to the enclave. Some consignment of trucks have reached, while many of them are stuck in Rafah, the main crossing in and out of Gaza that doesn't border with Israel. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
Amritpal Singh joins us from Jerusalem. Amrit, Israel has reacted furiously to the UN chief's remark in the UN Security Council that the Hamas's attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Israel has since responded by refusing visas to UN officials. Will all of this hamper UN efforts inside Gaza?
Well, it increases the sparring surely and does throw a certain amount of, creates a certain amount of hiccups. And throws a spanner in the works there with such sharp reaction from the UN, the ambassador of Israel to the UN, saying that the UN's chief, by giving such a statement, is justifying terrorism and murders that took place. But I'm sure, they will, as time passes by, get over it, because Israel is a member state of the United Nations, and the Israeli and the UN chief has put out his full statement saying that he had criticized both Hamas and Israel. In that sense, he said he took to X to say that what the Palestinian suffering cannot justify the horrendous acts of the Hamas, yet the horrendous attacks by Hamas do not justify the collective punishment. Basically, the UN chief trying to say that he's trying to make both sides see reason, because he's made calls for Hamas to release the hostages. So he's been appealing to both sides, and that's what his job is as a as the head of the United Nations, to see that crisis which is affecting the world gets resolved in the best possible manner, with least possible loss of life and maximum possible assistance to both sides. So I think right now you see very sharp reactions. Eli Cohen, the foreign minister of Israel, who is in New York for the UN session, cancelled his meeting with the UN chief. So it does throw up certain hiccups, but eventually, as time passes, I think it'll soothen the feathers, the ruffled feathers a bit. Yeah.
Right. Also, Amrit, Israel has intensified its bombing of southern Gaza overnight. I repeat, southern Gaza. And now this after ordering Gazans to leave northern Gaza for the south. Clashes have also been reported from the West Bank. Is the theatre of conflict widening or widened already to include the Fatah-ruled West Bank now?
I think it's widened already. The justification that Israeli forces, when we speak to them, give is that when you ask them that why did you bomb a refugee camp in West Bank, or why are you rounding up people? He said that they say they have Hamas supporters there, and it is when they go to arrest these supporters because they are trying to create problems. They attack the Israeli forces, and that is why you see the sort of reaction, and they say there are terrorist activities going on in the West Bank because Hamas has bases there as well. Remember, the Hamas in 2006 had not just won elections in the Gaza Strip, it had won elections in Palestine's parliament. So I mean, it has a support base in the West Bank as well, just that Israel at that time had refused to recognize Hamas, and Mahmoud Abbas's the Al-Fateh's Mahmoud Abbas became the president of the Palestinian State Authority, but it was Hamas which had overwhelmingly won the election. They are the de facto rulers of Gaza, so that is why they say they are bombing or targeting places in West Bank. But you're right, the theater of conflict has widened. The front with North is already hotting up. We saw airstrikes in Syria, killing 8 Syrian military personnel. Before that, we saw strikes hitting the Damascus airport and the Aleppo airport. So the theater of conflict is widening, though there are hectic efforts being made by the international community to see that it does not spill over, and both state and non-state actors already other than already involved do not get further involved. Ramesh?
And before we let you go, Amrit, any word on the fate of the hostages still in the Hamas's captivity?
According to Israel, there are 222 hostages. Of them, they said there could be more, but they can confirm 222. 4 have been released, 2 American women, 2 old women, Israeli women. The rest of them are there. There are hectic negotiations going on with mediation happening with the help of Qatar and Egypt. The last we heard was that there was some kind of understanding on releasing 50 more, but after the Turkish Foreign Minister's statement, it gives an indication that there is negotiation, there is give and take going on. Khalid Mashal, who is in Doha, the exiled Hamas leader, in an interview said that if Israel stops airstrikes, Hamas is ready to give the terrorists back. But what I know is that Khalid Mashal, Ismail Haniya, who are based out of Doha, are in regular touch with Hamas, and there is some kind of hard negotiation going on. But when will the release happen? Will it happen in batches? Will all be released? Will only foreign nationals be released? All that still remains unclear.
All right, we leave it at that for now. Amrit, thank you, appreciate it. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Israel protests UN chief's remark, denies visa to UN relief chief, refuses to issue visas to UN officials. And Japan court deems gender change rule invalid in a landmark case. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. As the Israel-Hamas war intensifies further, the Israeli military accuses Iran of having ordered recent attacks by the Tehran-backed militias in Yemen, Iraq and Lebanon. Here's a full report.
The war between Israel and Hamas entered its 19th day on Wednesday and is the deadliest of 5 Gaza wars for both sides. The Israeli military accused Iran on Wednesday of having ordered recent attacks by Tehran-backed militias in Yemen, Iraq and Lebanon and said Israel was jointly monitoring the region with its US ally.
Iran helped Hamas before the war directly with training, supplying weapons, money, technological know-how. Even at these moments, Iranian aid to Hamas continues in intelligence and incitement on the networks, in encouragement all over the world, in incitement against the state of Israel. In the Middle East, where the couriers, the proxies, as they are called by Iran, operate from Iraq, Yemen and Lebanon, the instructions come from only one place, from Iran.
Israel's military intensified its bombing of southern Gaza overnight.
Fuel will not enter the Gaza Strip. Hamas used the petrol for its military infrastructure. Fuel that Hamas stole from UNRWA should be taken back from Hamas and given it to the hospitals.
India has expressed concern over the Israel-Hamas war. New Delhi said it stands in solidarity with Israel against terrorism, but warns that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is equally alarming.
India has always negotiated two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine issue, leading to the establishment of a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders side by side in peace with Israel, taking into account the legitimate security concerns of Israel. Towards this, we reiterate the need for an early resumption of direct peace negotiations.
The head of Lebanon's Hezbollah met with top leaders of the Palestinian militant factions Hamas and assessed what their alliance must do to achieve victory for the resistance in Gaza. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim joined 16,000 pro-Palestinian supporters in capital Kuala Lumpur to condemn Israel's barbaric acts in Gaza and denounce its Western supporters. Many world leaders have already called for a halt to fighting to allow aid into the besieged enclave. On Wednesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also called for an immediate ceasefire. French President Emmanuel Macron met with Jordan's King Abdullah II in Amman in an effort to prevent regional escalation. Munmun Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron met Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo. Both leaders held talks and discussed ways to pause the Israel-Hamas war and provide humanitarian aid. The Egyptian president said that his country is playing a very positive role to de-escalate and find a diplomatic solution to the conflict. Israel will amend its national budget to meet expenses arising from the war against the Hamas. The country has said that the conflict is directly costing it $246 million on a daily basis. Israel still does not have an assessment of the indirect costs of the war on the economy, partly paralyzed by the mass mobilization of military reservists and rocket attacks from Gaza. Earlier, the S&P Global downgraded Israel's outlook to negative from stable. Pope Francis has renewed his call for the release of the hostages held by the Hamas. He called for humanitarian aid to be allowed into the Gaza Strip.
I'm always thinking about the grave situation in Palestine and Israel. I encourage the release of hostages and the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. I continue to pray for those who suffer and hope for paths of peace in the Middle East, the martyred Ukraine, and other war-torn regions.
Meanwhile, Israel has denied a visa to a senior United Nations official amid the West Asian country's growing dispute with the world body. This in protest against UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres' speech to the UN Security Council, in which he said that the Hamas's attacks against Israel did not happen in a vacuum. Guterres' remark triggered a furious response from Israel. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, told the Israeli radio that Tel Aviv denied a visa to UN Under-Secretary General Martin Griffiths and that it will refuse to issue visas to UN officials. A war of words erupted between the US and Iran at the UN amid fears of a spillover of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Addressing the UN Security Council, US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken said that Washington, D.C. does not seek a conflict with Iran, but warned that it would act swiftly if Iran or its proxies attack US personnel anywhere.
Let me say this before this Council, and let me say what we've consistently said to Iranian officials through other channels. The United States does not seek conflict with Iran. We do not want this war to widen. But if Iran or its proxies attack U.S. personnel anywhere, make no mistake, we will defend our people, we will defend our security swiftly and decisively.
For its part, Iran hit out at the U.S. for blaming Tehran for the Israel-Hamas war. It accused the U.S. of escalating the conflict by aiding Israel at the expense of the Palestinians.
Today, the U.S. Secretary of State once again attempts to wrongly place the blame on Iran. Iran categorically rejects these groundless allegations. Our commitment to the regional peace and stability remains unwavering. The U.S. has further exacerbated the conflict by overtly aligning itself with the aggressor at the expense of the innocent Palestinian population.
Israel's ambassador to the UN has called for the head of the world body to resign over his comments about the conflict in Gaza. In a tense meeting of the UN Security Council, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said on Tuesday that the Hamas's attack on 7th October did not happen in a vacuum. In response, Israel said he was justifying terrorism. DD India's Sally Patterson has more from New York.
Addressing the United Nations Security Council, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres didn't mince his words. He said he had condemned unequivocally the, quote, horrifying and unprecedented acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing, he said, can justify the deliberate killing, injuring and kidnapping of civilians. He went on to say it is important to recognise the, quote, attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. He said the Palestinian people had been subjected to 56 years of occupation. Now, Israel's UN ambassador, Gilad Erdan, described Guterres' speech as shocking. And in a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, he called on him to immediately resign. His comments, Erdan said, constitute a, quote, justification for terrorism and murder. Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen was in New York as well for the Security Council debate, but he said he'd cancelled his meeting with Guterres following the speech.
Saturday, October 7, will go down in history as nothing less than a brutal massacre. Saturday, October 7, is a wake-up call for the entire free world, a wake-up call against extremism and terror.
Meanwhile, member states called for de-escalation, with the United Kingdom warning attacks by Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and rising tensions in the West Bank could signal the wider region could become engulfed by war. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was also in attendance, and he stressed there would be repercussions if the situation spiraled further. Now, concerns were also raised about the humanitarian crisis continuing to unfold in Gaza. Guterres said that while some supplies are now getting into the Strip, it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need.
Thankfully, some humanitarian relief is finally getting into Gaza, but it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need. In addition, our UN fuel supplies in Gaza will run out in a matter of days, and that would be another disaster. Without fuel, aid cannot be delivered, hospitals will not have power, and drinking water cannot be purified or even pumped.
UN fuel supplies will run out in a matter of days, he warned, calling that a disaster. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
And DD India's Amritpal Singh filed this report from Jerusalem. Take a look.
Even as the Israel-Hamas war intensifies and Israel intensifies its aerial bombings and threatens both a ground assault and assault through the sea route, the situation is escalating. But India at the UN has said that civilian death count and civilian casualties are a matter of serious concerns and peace talks should be resumed. At the UN Security Council open debate, many countries, especially the Arab countries, stressed for a humanitarian pause, for a ceasefire and resumption of peace talks and immediate cessation of all military campaign by Israel. It was also appealed that proportionality be maintained in the military activity that Israel is doing, because the civilian death count and the evolving humanitarian crisis poses a great risk. On the other hand, the World Bank says that if this conflict spirals, it could have devastating consequences for the Middle East economies or the West Asian economies, which is the hub of energy and our oil-producing countries. And the world cannot afford this, even as the Ukraine-Russia war rages on. The world just is in no position to have another war. So where is the war going? Israel is insistent that it will not stop until it decimates Hamas. Though it's not very clear what do they mean by decimating Hamas. If they completely eradicate Hamas, assuming that happens, what will they do later? Who will be the new political leadership in the Gaza Strip? These are the questions being asked here, but Israel says it's not time for these questions to be asked. Right now their objective is to finish Hamas and see that the terrorism is wiped out. With cameraman SP Dubey, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Jerusalem.
Japan's top court has ruled legality of gender change unconstitutional. The top court issued a ruling in a family law court declaring that the stipulation of the special law on gender identity disorder, which mandates surgical sterilization as a prerequisite for gender reassignment, is unconstitutional in Japan. The Japanese law says people who want to change their gender must present a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and meet 5 requirements. While rights groups welcome the landmark verdict, the plaintiffs' lawyers argue that 2 of the requirements violated their clients' constitutional right to pursue happiness and live without discrimination. Now take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Bulgaria has taken the first steps towards the construction of 2 additional reactors at its Kozlody nuclear power plant, which will add combined capacity of 2,300 megawatts. A record 475 companies, including major car makers, are taking part in the first Japan Mobility Show, formerly known as the Tokyo Motor Show. Electric vehicles took center stage as Japanese automakers unveil the next generation concept cars. The event is being held for the first time in 4 years. U.S. actor Richard Roundtree, best known for his work in the U.S. film franchise Shaft, has died at the age of 81. He died after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. The actor began his career in the early 1960s and appeared in a number of movies and TV series, including The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and desperate housewives. And still to come on DD India News Hour. India is set to overtake Japan as the third largest economy by 2030. The Google parent company Alphabet's cloud business crawls to its slowest in at least 11 quarters. And dozens of US states sue Meta Platforms and its Instagram unit.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. UN chief says Hamas's attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Israel protests, denies visa to UN relief chief, refuses to issue visas to UN officials. A top Israeli official says Qatar's intervention in the humanitarian aspects of the war with the Hamas is crucial at this time. And first up, India has become an increasingly attractive location for multinationals across a wide range of industries. The US-based global ratings agency Standard & Poor's Global Market Intelligence said in its latest report. Take a look.
With an expanding consumer market and a large industrial sector, the Indian economy is set to surpass Japan by 2030. As per the S&P Global Market Intelligence, India will continue to be one of the world's fastest growing economies over the next decade. The report also suggests India's nominal GDP will rise from $3.5 trillion in 2022 to $7.3 trillion by 2030, making it the second largest economy in the Asia-Pacific region. India is a favorable place for important long-term growth markets in a wide range of industries, including manufacturing sectors such as autos, electronics and chemicals. The nation's rapidly growing domestic consumer market is another key accelerator for the economy. The IMF in October 2023 also revised India's growth estimate to 6.3% in 2024 due to resilient domestic demand and strong investment inflows.
The big thing about that growth rate is that it is not expected to fluctuate much, in the sense that it's not expected to go downward. The growth rate that they see now and projections of the growth rate that they see for the next 5-6 years, and that's saying quite a lot, is more or less very stable. In the world economy now, it's very difficult to get any large-sized economy where the growth rate is going to be so stable. That is what is attracting investors.
As per the report, the Indian economy has continued to show sustained growth despite high base year effects. The long-term outlook for the Indian economy is also supported by a number of key growth drivers, including the middle class, which is helping to drive consumer spending. The rapid growth of e-commerce and the shift to 5G smartphone technology will also be a boost to homegrown unicorns. S&P Global has also predicted that India's GDP will surpass Germany's by 2030. By the end of 2022, India's GDP had already become larger than the GDP of UK and France. The expansion of public digital platforms and path-breaking measures such as PM Gati Shakti, National Logistics Policy, and production-linked incentive schemes will give an immense boost to India's overall growth.
Professor Anil Kumar joins us from New Delhi. Professor Kumar teaches at the Sri Ram College of Commerce, University of Delhi. Professor Kumar, welcome to DD India News Hour. Now, as the report said that the S&P Global Market Intelligence says India is set to overtake Japan as the third largest economy by the year 2030. Does it bode well for India and by extension the world too?
I think that it is the consequence of whatever macroeconomic reforms Indian government has been doing for the last 7-8 years. During Corona Kal also, we have seen that we had big challenge, and that challenge was converted into a big opportunity by making structural reforms in almost all the sectors of the economy. The public sector was opened up, was reformed. The second, I think the greatest game changer has been the production-linked incentive plan, and the way it has boosted the manufacturing in this country and attracted the foreign investors into the key industry. I think that has been one of the very important reform which has been attempted. The other reforms, of course, are the ease of doing business, which started off in 2014 onwards. Then we had the GST, which is the biggest tax reforms attempted in this country. That means the whole country has become one market. Then during the last 4-5 years, we have seen the sustained capital expenditure made by the union government through the budget year after year. The focus on the infrastructure, the focus on the logistics, and whatever can be done to boost up the manufacturing is helping in boosting the Indian economy. At the same time, I would like to add that this growth which we are turning every year, which is in the range of 6 to 7%, is an inclusive growth. Is a growth which is sustainable growth. Almost all the sections of our population has been covered by different welfare schemes. It has boosted the private consumption also, and because of the stability of the policies and at the political level also, the foreign investors are attracted to this country. This is one of the favorite destinations, in fact, for the foreign investors as of now.
Professor Kumar, for the benefit of viewers tuning in from India and abroad who might not be familiar with the intricacies of the issue at hand here, could you, for their benefit, also tell them what is the Indian government doing right as compared to some other countries around the world? What explains the India growth story?
See, the focus on the manufacturing sector, this has been one of the major reforms which has been attempted. During Corona, there was a difficulty faced by almost every countries of the world. But, there was one way was to give the cash subsidy. Instead of doing that, the government of India adopted the policy of encouraging and promoting different sectors of the economy. We have seen that the digital transformation has taken place in this country as a revolution, and this technology is being exported to other parts of the country. India has become as hub of the electronic goods, and at the same time the computer related services and pharmaceutical also. So all this is helping the Indian economy in boosting the production and in boosting the GDP also. The spending on the infrastructure, it always has a multiplier effect. And during, as I said earlier, during the last 4 years, especially during Corona period, we have seen that the way the infrastructure sector has been boosted up, that has not only increased our infrastructure for the industry, but also has a multiplier effect. So this investment is supplemented with the investment by the private sector, and the India, in fact, has entered into a cycle of growth. We say it's a virtuous cycle of growth, that we are having more investment. More investment means that at the same time, more and more consumption. More and more consumption means increase in GDP also, and more investments also. So that way, I think that we are turning every year a growth which is unprecedented, which is among the highest in the largest economies of the world. And I think that going by the estimate of S&P, the day is not far off when it will be the third largest economy in the world.
Indeed. And finally, Professor Kumar, much of the global south is reeling under a debt crisis or debt burden. What does that tell you about the economic policy of the lenders, one, and two, the global financial institutions alike?
No, I would say that the way the financial institutions have been functioning in this country, the regulatory environment, which is led by the RBI, is one of the best. And at the same time, the policies of RBI has been to contain the inflation, but not at the cost of growth of the country. The RBI has always followed a policy of, taking a precaution that the inflation should not go out of bound, but at the same time, the growth momentum should not stop. And result, we can see that when most of the countries, the major economies of the world are into the recession or high inflation kind of situation, we are far, far away. We are insulated from those kind of factors.
Professor Kumar, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
In some more business news, Google's parent company Alphabet's cloud business crawled to its slowest in at least 11 quarters, sending the company's stock down 5.7% after hours, even as sales at rival Microsoft cloud unit boomed. The drop in Google's share price, despite beating Wall Street estimates for profit and sales, shows how much the investors want the company to deliver gains in artificial intelligence. Fears of a slowing global economy have prompted companies to curb spending on cloud-related services, including expensive AI tools, which has slowed revenue growth at Google's cloud unit to 22.5% in the third quarter from 28% in the prior three-month period. Dozens of U.S. states are suing Meta Platforms and its Instagram unit, accusing them of fueling a youth mental health crisis by making their social media platforms addictive. 8 other U.S. states and Washington, D.C. are filing similar lawsuits against Meta, bringing the total number of authorities taking action against the Menlo Park, California-based company to 42. Now take a look at some other stories making news in India. 2 coaches of the Patalkot Express train caught fire near Agra in the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. Officials said no casualties were reported. India will provide potash at lower prices during the upcoming winter season and try to keep the prices of other fertilizers unchanged, the country's Information Minister Anurag Singh Thakur said on Wednesday. India will spend $2.68 billion in total towards fertilizer subsidy. People living in India's commercial capital Mumbai struggled to breathe as the air quality dropped to very poor in the region on Wednesday. The Air Quality Index, or AQI, in the city measured 301, considered very poor. A prolonged exposure to it could lead to respiratory ailments. Indian Border Security Force recovered a made-in-China drone in the Amritsar district of the northern Indian state of Punjab. The quadcopter drone was recovered from a paddy field in Dhanawa Khurd village during a search operation. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Republican Party lawmakers in the U.S. select Mike Johnson as their nominee for Speaker in a secret ballot. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu addresses the country's troops in Ukraine's Donetsk region. And Indian athletes add 17 more medals to their tally at the Asian Para Games. कर दूं You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. The US Republicans have selected Mike Johnson as their next Speaker nominee in a secret ballot. Republican Tom Emmer dropped out of the race just hours after he was selected as the latest GOP nominee. Mike is the fourth nominee put forward after three others failed to win enough support from colleagues and the second nominee of the day. Johnson was selected after 3 rounds of voting. The House has been without a Speaker and has been unable to pass bills since Kevin McCarthy was ousted on the 3rd of October. Cooperation on critical minerals and bolstering the infrastructure on the Pacific Islands will be on the agenda as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese begins a 4-day visit to the US. He received a lavish welcome at the White House as US President Joe Biden looks to strengthen the relationship with Australia as part of his strategy to counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. DD India's Kate Fisher reports from Washington, D.C.
As the Biden administration is increasingly caught up in dealing with conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, the Australian leader's state visit will refocus its foreign policy back to the Indo-Pacific and its long-term interest in countering the rise of China. This state visit will include Prime Minister Albanese's 9th meeting with President Joe Biden in the past 16 months, showing just how important the relationship is for the US. For Australia, making progress on the AUKUS submarine deal will be a priority. The trilateral accord with the UK would give Australia access to nuclear-powered submarines for the first time, and it's widely seen as a counter to China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. But the pact faces hurdles in the US Congress, with Prime Minister Albanese saying that he'll meet US lawmakers every day that he's in Washington to highlight the need for progress. He also told reporters that he's focused on extending Australia's security alliance with the US into an economic and technology partnership as well. They will discuss a critical minerals task force to boost private investment in Australia's rare earths industry and to reduce global reliance on China. They'll also discuss infrastructure projects for the Pacific Islands. But Ukraine and the Middle East will also be on the agenda, of course, with the US president keen to show that he can manage the crises at hand while also furthering the US's long-term foreign policy objectives. Kate Fisher in Washington reporting for DD India.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu inspected the command post of the country's troops in Ukraine's Donetsk region. It was a part of the Russian Defense Minister's working visit close to the front lines. The minister told the assembled service personnel that the efforts were giving the Ukrainian forces fewer and fewer opportunities. Ukraine, in the month of June, undertook a counter-offensive, capturing villages in the east and south, but at a much slower pace than its rapid advance through the northeast a year ago. Ukraine says Russian forces in recent days have been pounding the eastern city of Avdiivka, but have sustained heavy losses. Sri Lanka's cabinet was given approval for waiver of visa fees for tourists from India and 6 other countries. Sri Lanka's tourism minister, Harin Fernando, on Tuesday said that apart from India, tourists from China, Russia, Malaysia, Japan, Indonesia and Thailand will benefit from the pilot initiative. The pilot project is to run until 31st March 2024 and aims to amplify Sri Lanka's tourism appeal. In the current year, Sri Lanka has welcomed more than 1 million tourists by September after the economic crisis had dented the industry. India leads the pack with more than 200,000 arrivals, closely trailed by Russia, as per data from the Sri Lankan Tourism Development Authority. And now to news from the world of sport. Australian batter Glenn Maxwell slammed the fastest 100 in ODI World Cup history to propel Australia to 399 for the loss of 8 wickets in New Delhi on Wednesday. Maxwell scored a 40-ball 100 to score overall 4th fastest ton in ODI cricket. Earlier, David Warner hit a century, and Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne smashed half-centuries as Australia dominated the proceedings. For the Netherlands, Logan Weyers van Beek bagged 4 wickets. Australia won the toss and elected to bat, but lost opener Mitchell Marsh early. David Warner and Steve Smith then held fort and helped Australia gather 160 for the loss of 2 wickets. In the chase, the Netherlands is at 27 without loss of any wicket when reports last came in. Indian athletes added more than 17 medals to their tally on Tuesday at the ongoing Asian Para Games in Hangzhou, China. So far, India has clinched a total of 55 medals, including 14 golds, 19 silvers and 22 bronze medals. In the men's discus throw sweeping, all 3 medals, Neeraj Yadav bagged gold, Yogesh Kathunia claimed silver and Muthuraja won the bronze. Sharath Makanahalli Shankarappa clinched the gold in the men's 5,000-meter event by clocking 20 minutes and 18.9 seconds. He has beaten Nabil Khalid Ahmed of Jordan by just 0.01 second. Ankur Dhama bagged the gold in the men's 5,000-meter event. In a series of social media posts, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India lauded the performance of the Indian athletes. India has sent a contingent of 303 athletes who are participating across 17 disciplines at the Asian Para Games. Afghanistan has stunned the cricketing world with 2 stupendous victories over England and Pakistan in the ongoing Cricket World Cup. Now, these wins are undoubtedly going to herald a new era in the strife-torn country as Afghans look ahead to script more history. DD India's Prateek Narayan Singh has more.
Afghanistan has turned out to be a giant slayer in the ongoing ICC World Cup. They trounced defending champion England by 69 runs, followed by their win over 1992 champion Pakistan by 8 wickets in the league matches. Their performance has been nothing short of miracle as they stamped their authority on the marquee tournament. When the tournament kicked off in early October, Afghans were considered not only underdogs but pushovers. The proposition was not unfounded as they had only defeated Scotland in 2015 edition of the tournament. Even in this edition, Afghanistan performance lacked bite in the beginning. They capitulated before Bangladesh and India in their first 2 matches. They were bowled out for 156 runs against Bangla Tigers, and Men in Blue chased their target of 272 with 15 overs to spare. But tables turned when they took on England, a formidable side and one of the contenders of the trophy. Afghanistan came into the match having lost 16 of their last 17 World Cup games. Put into bat, they posted 284 after a blistering knock of 80 from opener Rehmanullah Gurbaz and a half-century from Ikram Alikhil. England were all out 215 in reply. Harry Brook was the only batter to score a fighting 66. Spinners Mujibur Rahman and Rashid Khan took 3 wickets each. Afghanistan coach Jonathan Trott was effusive in his praises of the players and said, "There's a lot of confidence that will hopefully come from this when competing against the bigger nations, and it'll have a knock-on effect on all the other games, not only in this World Cup but for the future as well. What Afghanistan cricket can achieve, hopefully this will be the sort of kickstart." Many thought victory over England was a fluke. The assumption was not off mark because Afghanistan was bundled out for paltry 139 against New Zealand, losing the match by 149 run. But then came battle against Pakistan. Afghanistan pulled off their second giant killing act with a remarkable 8-wicket victory against their neighbour. Afghanistan's top 3 batters smashed 50s. Skipper Hashmatullah Shahidi made an unbeaten 48 as they successfully chased a competitive 283-run target. The win was set by spinners. Afghanistan had 4 tweakers in their playing 11 and the gamble paid off. Rashid Khan, Mujibur Rahman, Muhammad Nabi and Noor Ahmed had a stranglehold on the proceedings.
They picked up 4 for 176 from their combined 38 overs, while Pakistan's spinners Shadab Khan, Usama Mir and Iftikhar Ahmed conceded 131 runs without taking a wicket. No doubt, the landmark wins over England and Pakistan in the World Cup will cause a ripple effect in Afghan cricket and inspire future players. Also, there's high expectation from Afghanistan when they square off against Sri Lanka in next match. It will be interesting to see whether Afghanistan can make to the semi-final. Prateek Narayan Singh, DD India.
And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website, ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Ramesh Ramachandran from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.